This meeting is being recorded. There you go, everyone. So, okay, welcome, good morning, and there is Matt, perfectly on time. So I will just share my screen so you can see what I have on the agenda. I have the agenda that I sent out to everybody yesterday morning, and we had a request from Matt Moore to take this. Come on, don't tell me I can't do it right now.
I move to approve the request from the McQuaid.
Yeah, to move it. The request is to move this up to the front and do that first thing because Matt has a meeting at 8:30. So if there are no objections to that, we can do that right after introductions. No objections from anyone? Okay, could we do a quick round of introductions though, just because there are still some, I don't know if anybody is super new, but it is always just nice to do a quick round of intros. I do see an iPhone here. I'm not sure who iPhone is right now.
That's Caleb from Pine County.
Caleb, is that what I heard? Okay, yep. Perfect. Okay. There we go.
Craig Mel, Chisago SWCD. Tiffany, you're next.
J. Riggs, Washington County, SWCD.
Tiffany Detterman, Nisani Soil and Water.
Angie Hong from MREP.
Barbara Heitkamp from MREP and Lower St. Croix.
How is it that Mike wasn't muted, but we still couldn't hear him?
Mike Eisenseigh, Carnelia Marine St. Croix Watershed District. There we go. Thanks, Angie.
Excellent. I could tell you weren't muted. I just could.
Molly Hines, Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District.
Hey, good morning. This is Becky Wasney, Anoka Soil and Water. And unfortunately, I can't use my video today because I'm having some connection issues.
Okay.
Matt Moore, Administrator, South Washington Watershed District.
Karen Kill.
Middle St. Croix. Oh, sorry, Karen.
Go for it.
I'm Matt. Hi.
Karen, Browns Creek.
Paul Swanson, Pine SWCD.
Maureen Hoffman, Washington County Public Health and Environment.
Anybody left?
Michael Bowser.
All right.
I see Jerry Spetzman's on here.
Jerry Spetzman, Chisago Lakes Lake Improvement District. Thank you.
Morning, everybody.
Morning, everybody.
Okay, wonderful. I successfully rearranged the agenda so that we can talk about the Urban and Agricultural Projects Subcommittee first. And there are attached notes that came out from the Mega Subcommittee discussing activities 2, 4, and 5. They met on June 10th. And I'll let Craig or Mike talk about the general conversation that happened in the group, but there is a specific request from the subcommittee to recommend funding for the South Washington Watershed District McQuaid Ravine project. And so Matt Moore can talk about that project specifically. But I'll stop the share and maybe let Mike or Craig talk about the committee conversation in general.
Mike, do you want to take first stab?
No, you can take it, Craig. That's fine.
Okay, sounds good. So the subcommittee met back on June 10th. You can see the minutes that were included in the agenda packet here today. Just kind of quickly reviewed the cost share rates that this committee recommended last time. We did review the overall scoring process. Mike went through that on a good detail with us. And then we moved right into looking at 2 shovel-ready projects. We'll let Matt Moore go a little bit here, but Matt Moore had a project he brought forth in the South Washington Watershed District. And Mike Eisenseigh actually withdrew his application after he realized that it didn't meet the gatekeeper questions, the criteria. So the group then focused on the one project from South Washington Watershed District. I'll let Matt explain that project now if he would at this point.
Thanks, Craig. And Angie for moving me up. I got
Yeah.
to talk to a city administrator at 8:30. So McQuaid Ravine is something we've been working on with the Conservation District in Washington County for a couple of years. We were able to get it designed, get it out for bid, and we're actually under construction. Angie, I don't know if you can share a couple of pictures that I sent you this morning.
I can do that. Let me find those real quick.
Yeah, so they're actually probably gonna be done here this week, building it. And I realize that it's not the way we want to do things. But as long as we're meeting all the timeline requirements, I think it's a good project. And we've estimated that, well, a year ago, that area of Denmark Township had down by
Right.
St. Croix Bluffs Park and Afton Alps State Park. They had about a 7 to 8 inch rain. And so we actually, the ravine actually is about twice the size as what it was when we designed it. And so putting in a lot of kind of additional riprap and things, but there's a side channel which you're looking at now, and then a main channel. So it includes some storm sewer. You can see catch basin and manhole there, manhole at the bottom. This is a side ravine, and then we got the main ravine at the top with another manhole and 12-inch storm sewer that goes down and outlets. We estimated about 250 tons of sediment straight to the St. Croix. And about, I think it was 220 pounds of phosphorus per year. So just between that one event, like I said, it basically doubled in size. And so they're just about done with construction. And again, I realize this isn't the way we're going to do things in the future. Hopefully, you know, everybody realizes that we got to bring projects forward. And we actually just were contacted. We got another ravine down there Jay's going to take a look at. So we might have another project for maybe next year, but we also have Trout Brook that we're working on that goes through the state park, and we do have a phase 2 on that project. So we've got plenty of projects in the queue that we can spend watershed-based funding on. And just so everybody remembers, watershed-based funding is meant to put things on the ground. And us in Lower St. Croix we realized that there's a lot of data acquisition that needs to be done. And I'm not opposed to that. But we do have some of these projects that we can put on the ground as well. So we're going to have to kind of balance our budget going forward and make sure that we're getting the data that we need, as well as getting the projects that we need. Does anybody have any questions?
I have a quick question. The contributing drainage area is in agricultural production?
Correct.
Thank you.
I had a couple of questions, Matt. So you said that the phosphorus reduction to the St. Croix River is estimated at 220 pounds per year, or that was the existing load you estimated?
That was, so after that rainfall event, we did a survey, or we did an estimate, and yeah, 220 pounds a year.
Is what is reduced by the project, or is the existing load, or you're reducing, you're preventing the entire existing load?
We're preventing that amount.
Okay.
And I mean, as the ravine stabilizes, there will still be some, sedimentation and loading, but you can actually see it on Google Maps. There's a big plume and a big delta right in the St. Croix from this Lake St. Croix from this ravine. It's a tributary ravine right to the river.
What's the lifespan of this project?
Oh, good question, but I think, normally we design things for 100-year, but this is probably a 50-year kind of thing. And the district got the easements in exchange for the project, so we didn't pay anything for easements. And then we'll be doing maintenance for 3 years.
Maintenance for 3 years.
Yep.
Okay. Do you have at this point like a lifetime estimated cost for the project? Like what it costs to construct and then what the 3-year maintenance is, and then obviously the cost to come back and make sure it's maintaining over 50 years, right?
Yeah, it's something that we'll just put in our resiliency fund going forward, but I do not have lifetime costs.
Okay. What's just the construction cost?
What was it, Craig? 243?
243, 245.
245.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks. Just trying to get some numbers to wrap my head around the project.
Are there any other questions about this project from the steering committee? I do have some comments I want to make. So the subcommittee met. There were 5 of the joint powers members present. 5 partners. Actually, there's more than that. Some members had 2 members present. It was a unanimous recommendation to fund this project at the $175,000, which would use about 49% of our current funding available. And we would get about 44% of our pollution reduction. And Barb, I'll get right to you in just a second if that's okay. And so Bowser, maybe I'll go ahead, Barb, and see if you want to comment on Bowser's comments about this project.
Go ahead, Craig.
Bowser did submit comments. Bowser had some concerns because the project had started already. But at the end of the day, Bowser's comments were more of a setting a policy moving forward. And they don't like projects being constructed prior to encumbrance of the funds, but there was nothing in the manual that Dan Fabian could find, both the grants administration manual or the WBI funding policy, that said the steering committee ultimately couldn't recommend, the SWC board couldn't approve this project. At the end of the day, I have had some discussions with my board, and I think it's going to be important to have a very strong support by the subcommittee and steering committee moving forward for this project. I have talked to my assistant county attorney, Jeff Fuge, about this project, and he's actually drafting a memo that I should have hopefully today, showing that there is not an issue with our board approving this project, even though it started ahead of time. So I was hoping to have it in time for this meeting, but I do not. Matt, one last comment I will make is I think all of you know, I fully expect the state government to get things resolved before June 30th, but if there is a shutdown and we can't encumber any funds towards a project during that shutdown, so if the project is not completed by June 30th, any work during that time, during the shutdown, we'd have to have discussions about how that's getting paid for, if this project's approved. That's the end of my comments. Go ahead, Barb.
Yeah, and I'm sorry I'm covering for Dan last minute today. Yeah, so because your overall grant was encumbered, I mean, so if that construction happened before the actual grant was encumbered with Bowser, then that money can't be used, right?
Correct. The grant agreement was signed by Bowser on March 30th of 2021, and this project started the week of June 1st.
Okay. So I would just wanted to follow up with that. I'm sorry
Sorry, I didn't have time to chat with Dan. And then this relates to what action item number 2 of your plan. Does anybody have that reference? I'm sure the subgroup looked at that.
I have it. What's your question, Barb?
Implementation table, is it like action item number 2, action item number 14? Which one does it fall under? You don't have to answer it right now. And I assume it's the St. Croix River, right, Matt? That's the primary water body, which is one of your prioritized water bodies, right? And then did the subgroup use your targeting project selection, targeting criteria, whatever you came up in the appendices of your plan? I was just curious how that was working out. And thank you. Sorry again, I wasn't at the last meeting. I didn't have time to touch base with Dan, so maybe he asked all the same questions.
I can take first start. Yes, Barb, we did use the scoring mechanism, which worked out very well. This project ranked very high because of numerous reasons: proximity, overall load reduction. I think which one of the questions, does anybody else remember some of the other questions I guess Barb had there?
Just which action item, you can tell me later from your actual plan, if it was like number 2 or number 14, because then that has the priority water body, which I think is the St. Croix River, which is one of your priority water bodies. I'm just curious how that's all working.
Craig, I don't remember you and I had a discussion about where to put this. Decided to put it in the Ag BMP, right?
You did, and that's something we have to discuss as a group. I mean, that'll use up basically all of our Ag BMP funds, but we can always do a work plan amendment with Bowser and shift funds around if we need to. Mike, did you have some comments? I see you unmuted yourself.
No, I don't. Thanks.
Thank you.
I had one more quick question, and I think this is all information we're gonna get in writing when the request for funds comes, but probably just good to cover with the steering committee here. I think 2 more questions. What is so the project cost is $245,000. How much grant funds are being requested? And then exactly which, would this be considered small streams draining to St. Croix River? I'm looking at table 5-2 in the plan, and it's identifying the tributaries to the St. Croix River, and just want to make sure I know where this one's falling.
So it's be direct drainage. I think we have that, don't we?
It's directly draining to the St. Croix, yes.
It's not, there's no running water.
No.
It's just
So it's the St.
heavily-
Croix. So it's just the St. Croix.
Okay. I don't think that's in the table, but you'd think it should be, so we'll figure out how to report that. And then how much in grant funds is being requested?
The subcommittee recommended unanimously $175,000 of grant funds for this project.
Thank you, Emily, for getting all these details down. We know you're going to use this right in our reporting, so we appreciate that.
Well, and that's all going to be provided in writing later. That's kind of a requirement of getting the funds, but just good to talk about here too, I think.
So out of curiosity, I'm pretty sure, but I just wanted to ask, I think that the Watershed District and Conservation District have worked with McQuaid on conservation practices on the farmland in the past as well. Is that correct?
Is it McQuaid, Jay, or is it Schaefer? Schaefer?
We've worked with Schaefer.
Which is in the upland area.
Correct.
Okay. I mean, I guess just going back to, I know Caleb was asking about if the contributing source is farmland, like have the entities also worked with that upland area as well? And it sounds like the answer is yes.
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, what is being done to prevent that erosion from occurring in the future and high flows from just washing out the project, right?
This project is preventing it. The watershed is not very big, but it's amazing what 8 inches of rain will do. Tony, have you got anything to add to that?
No, again, what Matt just said is right. The watershed is not very big, and there's not a good alternate outlet for the water upstream from this. And so I that's been looked into quite a bit. So this project really does address directly that flow from across the road to the north.
I know Matt is running short on time, so I guess what I'd like to get to before Matt has to leave, I'd like to get to a discussion on moving this project forward, yes or no.
And Craig, Tony can handle it from here if I gotta go.
Okay, thank you. I guess I would like to hear from the group.
I mean, we don't have to do motions, but do we want to try to do like a consensus-based thing? Or if anybody has any issues or concerns, or do we want to do a motion?
I guess I would like to hear, does anybody have concerns why this project should not move forward as the fiscal agent? We have it looks like we have 13 of the 16 members participating today, and so I would really like to get unanimous support for this to go to my board if possible. That's why I'm asking that question.
I mean, I'm one of the few people in the room here who've been to the site other than the watershed folks, and this is one of those classic ravine stabilizations that the BMP that is necessary is the BMP that's being completed out there. There is no way to stabilize this ravine by doing alternative cropping in the watershed. It has to have this high level of stabilization, and then it's a huge contribution to the St. Croix. It's right at the Kinney Narrows. It is, just, and unfortunately we have a few of these along the St. Croix, as you know, Craig, but I strongly support this project.
And although I've not seen the project, we've done 20 some projects similar to this, not quite to this cost scale, but we've addressed a lot of the large gully ravine projects along the St. Croix. And I know the detail it takes in the process. So I would also support without seeing the project, but I would like to. So at the end of the day, if there's anybody who objects, please speak up or ask questions now, because otherwise I'd like to kind of get a kind of a roll call vote, or at least a head nod of everybody. I guess I would prefer to actually get a yes, please move forward with it. So I'm just gonna, Tiffany, you good?
Yes.
Okay, Emily, I'm just gonna ask a member from each of the, okay, if you want to give a thumbs up, that'd be great too. Go ahead, just give a thumbs up on your reactions, that's fine.
I'm not gonna vote. I don't think I'm gonna hold it up, but Mike's our voting member, so I'm just gonna not vote.
Well, Emily, do you anticipate any, I guess my question is, my board is concerned that there'll be policy committee members that will be not happy with this process moving forward as an after the fact process. And so I want to make sure that's spelled out there right now by anybody. So Emily, do you think that'll be an issue by your board?
I don't see that happening.
Okay.
But Craig, it's not after the fact. We're within the timelines for watershed-based funding.
True. Okay.
Do you think that going forward, though, I mean, being that this was the first project, we just got the funds, Matt already gave us a heads up that this project was coming, and it was, timeline was really pretty urgent to get moving on it. Do you think now that we have this funding that we will not be, I feel like it's pretty clear to me that this isn't going to be the process for this group going forward. We were just developing our criteria, just figuring out all of this stuff. So feels like something that you'd also articulate that we're, comfortable with it because of this specific project and what's
Sure.
going on, but that we understand this won't be the process going forward, even though we're still, following to the letter of the law with the Bowser grant, that this group would still prefer to do, make sure that we're approving it before any expenditures are happening.
You're exactly right, Karen. This is not the process we're gonna follow. We're gonna have we're gonna have projects laid on the table with funding requests that are ready to go, and, you know, everybody knows, or everybody has an expectation of what we're gonna do. This is not the norm.
This just feels like growing pains, right? Like we're just sort
Yeah.
of figuring out this process. And with that, I'm completely comfortable. It sounds like an amazing opportunity for a very low cost and to do some really great work. So my thumbs up.
Very well put, Karen. I appreciate that. Well, that sounds good. I will draft up an RBA. I'm working with my county attorney. I should have a sub-agreement, Matt, for you to review. It's the same type of sub-agreement that we have with the Washington Conservation District and the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Wash District. This will be for project implementation. I'll hopefully have that today still. As soon as I get that information, I'll send it to you. I'll work with you on my board RBA. And this will go to my board on Tuesday, July 13th. Matt, was that the same day as your board meeting?
Correct.
Okay, so we'll work and hopefully have approvals by our boards that day.
What was
Yep.
the day of the board meeting?
Tuesday, July 13th. Matt, I don't know if you want to come up to the board meeting. They'd love to see you. It's at 8 a.m.
They don't want to see me.
Oh, they would love to see you, Matt. Come on.
You're so full of crap. I will come.
Who hired, did Jim Burkholz probably have a process in hiring you way back when someday? And
Yeah.
hired.
Yeah.
What does Jim have that's ripening right now? He doesn't have apples yet, obviously.
He's a little busy with strawberries.
Yeah.
Barb Peichel has another question.
Go ahead, Barb.
Curious, since you haven't had a lot of projects go forward yet, and you're a JPC, so do you take specific projects to your policy committee and they make a recommendation to Craig's board, or they just approve the work plan? Like, what are you going to do with the policy committee?
Yeah, we talked about that at the last steering committee and policy committee meeting, that the way the JPC was written there, the policy committee's role is just to approve the annual work plan. And then the decisions that happen within the year are decided as a recommendation from the steering committee that goes to the Chisago SWCD for approval. So
Barb,
for the
everything
policy
runs through-
committee, we're just kind of keeping them updated, I guess.
Correct. Everything runs through. It starts with the subcommittee. Subcommittee makes a recommendation to the steering committee. The steering committee makes recommendation to the Chisago SWCD board. I think we're done
Craig?
with that part, Angie.
What was that?
Yeah, great. I have another question. I'm just curious, if it isn't approved, how is the funding plan? What was the funding plan if this is not approved? Because the project has already started, and there must have been some thought as to how are we going to pay for this if the grant doesn't pay?
Yeah, good question, Jerry. So the watershed district has funds, and we cobbled together some grants from the St. Croix River Association and with the Conservation District. And so we could fund the project, and bids came in a lot lower. They left about $80,000 on the table. So, things worked out in the end. The issue we have is that fund in the lower St. Croix, because we can't commingle funds between lower St. Croix, South Washington, and East Mississippi. So if we were to do this project on our own, we would have spent all those funds. So now with this watershed-based funding, along with other projects we're going to do, now we can start other projects because we'll have the funding to start surveys, feasibility studies, survey and design, and get other projects built potentially as soon as next year.
Okay, thanks.
And sorry, one more question for me, but, and maybe this is us kind of figuring out the process of, how we want to go through this. Is the subcommittee going to send out that Appendix C scoring matrix for this project? Like to the steering committee, filled out, or at least just the final score that it got? Craig, you're muted.
Yes, we can do that. That's not a problem. We have that. Matt provided that to us and we reviewed it at the process. So, Angie, is that something you can share with the group?
I appreciate you guys.
Yeah, if you get it to me, I can get it to the group.
Tony can handle it from here.
Take care, Matt.
Thank you.
Matt.
Bye, Matt.
Okay, so Craig, you'll send that scoring matrix to me and I can send it to the group and yeah, I guess I'm also trying to figure out like how much information needs to be posted on the website versus just sent by email to the group. Do people have thoughts if something like that needs to be posted on the website? Or just sent as an email?
I don't think we necessarily need to post it to the website, but
Okay.
I think Emily brings up a good point and like what's our process. And
Mm-hmm.
I actually think it would be really nice to have just a memo that summarizes all the things that Emily has been asking, and then also the scoring sheet for every project that the steering committee is going to be reviewing. So I think we've looked at this a lot. So I think for this first one, I'm comfortable with continuing to move it without having that formal process in place. But I do think in the future, we're going to be not going to be doing after the facts, and then we can have a little bit more information for this group. And it would be really nice to have just actually a plan set, or at least a graphic of the project itself, since this group ultimately we're like the BMP subcommittee for the Chisago board. So we really do need to be able to like say, yep, we agree with this ranking and we're comfortable with it. And that would mean a little bit more information. So
Yeah, I like that too, Jay, because we talked about having a quarterly email that would go, or a quarterly newsletter style email that would go to the policy committee, giving them information about how the grant funds are being used. And so that would be really nice to, for my purposes, if I'm putting together an email, to have a nice photo and a nice just, like description of the project. This is what the cost is. This is what the benefit is. This is how far it gets us towards our pollution reduction goals.
So we should pull together a project sheet.
Yeah, and then
That
you
sounds great.
wouldn't need to worry about like formatting it, but then it makes it really easy for me to put together, a newsletter. I see Barb was asking about having a Google Drive. And Emily said she could set one up. That's a great idea, because I have documents like this stored on our server, but then they're not necessarily accessible for everybody else. So that would work well.
those are little micro details that we can figure out. One of the things that really, so it's like for our next project, let's, start out, let's kind of use that to help show the format we want to use for the future. And this will evolve over time.
So did I understand you're saying retroactively, you're still going to create a project sheet, or, basically that information? I think that we still need to get that in like our files, right? To make sure we have that information.
I could set up kind of a template just based on like the reporting stuff I need after the fact. What's some of that stuff we need right up front to decide if we even want to approve it. So, and I say we, but the steering committee.
I think that's a great idea. The person who has to do the final reporting is the best person to say what data should be in it. So
yeah, that would be
required
great.
in an Excel format, with the certain, exactly how you want it. So let's make it easy for you.
I'd like Emily to coordinate that with Angie or Barbara, since they have to tell our stories after the fact, to make sure that, there's a few juicy tidbits that are in there too, that, they can use for helping to share our stories, since we're all terrible at sharing our stories beyond the facts. 220 pounds of phosphorus. And we're all like, woo! And we're all like,
Well, and speaking from the person who does always have to try to make it into a compelling story, sometimes even trying to get the basic details is difficult, because you're all so busy and you're just throwing stuff in the ground and working away. And I'm like, could somebody just tell me when this project started and who the landowner is, and just those basic details that you need to share a story out with the public or with the policy committee.
I just want to see the infographic that Tony's going to come up with for this project.
No, I think Angie's coming up with the infographic, isn't
The
it?
infographic.
But yeah, so we'll work together on that, Angie, or you'll work with John or Matt. I think
Okay.
that's the most involvement with this one at this point. But yeah, we'll get that going.
Okay. So is there anything else that this subcommittee wants to talk about right now, this Urban and Agricultural Project Subcommittee? Mike, do you want to talk about the fact that you withdrew request for your project? I mean, should we, as long as we're on this subcommittee, should we just go ahead and finish it up before we move on to the other subcommittees?
Sure. It was a simple one. Goose Lake is listed in the prioritized water bodies, but it's the wrong Goose Lake. So I didn't check my numbers. And then that goose is actually listed in the internal load prioritization table. So anyway, so it was just it was an error on my part. And then I would say that the rest of the subcommittee, we covered some business. One of the pieces we gave I provided a quick update that Jay is going to cover as well. But it looks like the prioritization work for the non-structural urban BMPs will occur in the fall, early winter of this year, and that we anticipate will be allocating funds for requests for targeted street sweeping early in the year of 2022.
Angie, I'd like to discuss briefly, the group did start discussing activity 4, which is a non-structural ag urban BMP implementation.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And the group decided to, I'm trying to think exactly how we put it, basically adopt or recommend adopting for non-structural ag BMPs, the non-structural land management practices by the local SWCD, and I believe watershed district also. Is that correct, Jay? And so I did send out to the group an email request for partners, to the SWC partners, I apologize. And currently the Washington Conservation District and the Chisago SWC have non-structural land management practices adopted by their board. The Anoka, Isanti, and Pine do not have ones for this watershed. And so that is something as a subcommittee, I plan on putting together a subcommittee meeting in July if we can get one together. Because we're gonna have another request coming forward, I believe, by the Pine SWCD for some funding, and then I'd like to kind of finalize the discussion on the non-structural. So we are working through the non-structural part of it. And then also we're talking about technical and engineering, and we're gonna basically handle that and score it the same as we do for these activities 2 and 5. Go through kind of the same scoring process if someone comes forward wanting to do a technical assistance engineering project. So any more comments on that, Jay? You kind of helped lead some of the discussion on both of those.
Yeah, I think just to clarify, I think it was that we approved or recommended each county use its own SWCD non-structural, and that to have consistency, and then it wouldn't vary from watershed to watershed. And Abe was on our subcommittee, and he supported that approach.
So for Pine and Isani, where there isn't currently a non-structural policy, what happens then? The group
We will have to adopt something.
Okay.
And I've talked to both Tiffany and Paul about that, and Tiffany, I see just unmuted too, and they're open to adopting something if we need to. So my suggestion would be we have a subcommittee meeting in July and kind of move forward with those next steps.
Okay.
Tiffany, does that work for you?
How that works. I was just gonna say, like, we don't have like our Bowser submitted non-structural policy, but we have our own non-structural cost share rates that our board sets. I mean, so we do have them as a policy. They're just not the ones that get approved by Bowser. So I think it'll work, but we can talk about it later.
Yep. And all that means is that they just have to put it in a format and submit it to Bowser.
Is there a lot of variation from county to county in terms of what your non-structural policies are currently?
some of our rates are a little higher than Chisago's, but other than that,
Okay,
they're very, very similar policies.
I was
And
just curious.
well, it makes sense they're similar policies because we copy and paste from all of our partners. So
We
but yeah, the
share.
rates are slightly, exactly. We collaborate efficiently, but we have a couple things I think where the rates in Washington are a little bit higher than what Chisago has. And that's one of the reasons I like the idea of going with the counties, each county's rates, because we do have differences in land value and expenses and other things like that in the watershed. And so I think that addresses that. It will definitely come up in the conversation about when we do cost benefit of where we want to do BMPs, but even with our higher rates in Washington, it's still, these non-structural practices are still very cost effective.
Yeah, we were just, Barbara and I were touring with Paul and Caleb up in Pine County yesterday and looking at some really large farm practices that were very inexpensive up there compared to what I recall are similar projects costing Washington.
Mm-hmm. We just got to get all of our contractors, we got to ship them in from Pine and Northern Chisago. So pay a
So
little
anyway,
bit
if you're
more
on
for
the
mobilization.
subcommittee for activity 2, 4, and 5, look for a doodle poll coming out shortly for a July meeting.
Okay.
That's everything, Angie, that we have.
I'm ready for my A1 update. I can go right into it.
One moment. Yes. Why don't you do the A1 update? But before you do, Jay, Craig, originally I was going to have you and Emily talk about the subcontracts time tracking billing procedures for WBIF at the very front of the meeting. Do you want to do that now, or do you want to go through the subcommittee updates first and do that at the end?
We can quickly do this. That's fine.
Okay. Which,
You want to open up the document?
yeah, I can do that. Sorry, Jay, is that okay with you? All right. Yes, sorry, too many screens are open.
Emily, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure, if you want. I think the only update really would just be, now that we've got this first project, it'll be on South Washington to go through this, follow all the instructions, fill this out completely. And then, I don't know, I guess like send it to you and me.
Yep.
And then that they won't have to send it out to the whole group in the future, because the steering committee group will have had basically all of that information in that memo beforehand. And so I think the way we're going to do this process is we'll have this memo template to go to the steering committee with the recommended project. And then they'll already have all that information, and it'll be really easy to fill out this spreadsheet afterward because they've already compiled it to recommend it for approval anyway.
Correct. So both Emily and Jay, you guys can look at filling out the first round of your quarterly invoice come the end of June. So that'd be great. I'll send that out to you guys too as a reminder after June 30th and kind of give you a hopeful deadline date to get that back to us.
Can do.
So do you want me to go through any of these tabs, Emily, for you to talk about?
I don't think so, Craig. Were you wanting to do that?
No, I'm good. I think we're in good shape. I think we're ready to go on it. I appreciate Bowser's help with this, and Emily and I have worked together on it, and I think we're ready to go.
Okay, dokie. Then, yes, Jay, then you can begin your A1A Beachfront Avenue Agronomy Outreach update.
Excellent. So as I think we talked about the last steering committee meeting, we met as a subcommittee, talked about options for moving forward with A1. The topic of bringing the extension in as a partner came up. And so from that meeting, I reached out to the extension, had good meetings, a good meeting with the extension folks, and they actually submitted a concept cost estimate for having an embedded extension agent serving the Lower St. Croix Basin, dedicated to serving the Lower St. Croix Basin. And they have over 30 embedded extension agents doing similar things in other parts of the state where they are embedded for a county, for example. And the cost for that embedded extension agent that would be dedicated full-time to the St. Croix was actually very comparable to what the cost would be to go through the conservation district. Which, Craig, I do need to talk to you about how we deal with the facility cost piece of that, because that's one of the ways that the extension was able to get their price down, is that they don't have any facility costs. But anyway, all things said, even if you include those facility costs, it was very comparable. So then it really came down to whether we wanted to have our own local full-time employee or have an embedded extension agent. So then we had another subcommittee meeting last week. Barbara, when was that?
Sorry, it was last Wednesday, I believe.
Thank you. And the group had a very good discussion about the pros and cons of FTE versus having an embedded extension agent. And in the end, the group recommended moving forward with pursuing an embedded extension agent. So I followed up with the extension early this week, and they're going to be compiling the contracts and agreements so we can take a look at that and how that might be set up. And then I'm going to be sharing with them the revised job description position announcement that we edited during our subcommittee last week. So that's moving forward. One of the key concerns that the subcommittee had about going with an embedded extension agent was the timeline and how long it might take to get somebody on board. And I did talk to Joel from Extension Service about that and expressed our interest in having this process move forward. And if we have he said one of the key things that takes so long is the job description. And that we already have. And so that will help us expedite the early part of the process. And then he also said that coordinating all the interviews and having that process be expedited is more of kind of just a logistics thing. And so I think we're going to learn from each other. I'm looking forward to participating in that process, anticipating we have at least one other subcommittee member on the interview committee, evaluating resumes and others, but we're going to work out those details, but we have very intensive involvement by our subcommittee in moving forward. And I do anticipate it feeling a lot like what we did for Barbara's position, that we have, a couple Lower St. Croix folks along with the staff leads participating. And I haven't brought this to my board yet, but I don't see there being any issues with that, because the person would likely be housed at our office regardless of how we go, FTE or embedded extension. And I don't see our board having an issue with that. So Barbara, or Angie, do you want to add anything?
The basic thing, my continual recommendation is just to make sure that you stay in the driver's seat, because things fall off radars. Just keep at the U. They can move so slowly.
I will just add, Jay invited me to participate in the meeting. I was not at the beginning in favor of an embedded type employee from Extension. And after a good discussion by the whole steering committee or the subcommittee, and I know I wasn't alone in that discussion, the subcommittee was very in favor, very strongly supported going this direction, which I appreciate, Jay, the work you did up front to get that ready for them, because that really made a good decision for us.
So realistically, when do you think a person might be starting, Jay?
I told Joel that I'd like 3 months.
What does that get us to, September or October?
It would be this fall, yep. And if we can make that happen, if we can have somebody on board by fall, that would be a miracle. I'm a little skeptical, but with Barbara's help, pushing the right buttons.
Matt Downing is asking, what were the major, sorry, the bubble disappeared right before I said it. What was the major pro of having an embedded extension agent versus hiring a staff person?
There were quite a few pros. During the recruitment process, we get a much larger pool and probably higher caliber applicants, or at least a larger number of applicants, because of the association with the University of Minnesota. a lot more people might be interested in that job because it is a University of Minnesota job and not necessarily a amorphous Lower St. Croix thing. So there's a lot more stability. The U has great benefits. So that is a big deal for folks.
You just got to keep bringing that up.
Got to keep bringing that up. and then also just the intimate connection with the extension and being able to leverage all the resources available at the U. And then the embedded piece of it is interesting because when their percentage of time of working at the U or not in the Lower St. Croix would be a relatively small part of their time. They'd have access to training and educational activities. Since we're going to be defining the job description and the work plan responsibilities, we're really driving that. So the cons are that it is the U is a big ship and it can turn slowly. And we have more control over an FTE if we hire them directly. And at the same time, we can write our contract however we want. We can write it so if we're not happy with the position, we can change our mind and move forward. And that's the other piece. Yeah, Caleb's point too about street cred among farmers in your neighborhood, that's great. That really varies. And since we really don't have active extension in Washington, we haven't had a lot of that in recent years. My experience with extension was working down in Dakota SWCD, where my office was co-located with the extension service. So I really got used to having direct access to extension in Dakota County for a lot of years. And, when we first started this conversation, that for me was a model. Is like, I wanted an extension like agronomist. That's really what I was advocating for. And so I think this can be the best of both worlds. But I was like Craig, I was more supportive of having an internal applicant, but when the U explained their concept of the embedded agent and all those other things, and after the conversation with the extension folks and how excited they are and how willing they are to work with us, I changed my opinion on it, and I'm very supportive of this approach.
Matt had a question and I did too. Matt was asking who the person would report to. Are they reporting to you or the extension?
Okay.
Or this committee?
We would have to formalize that, but the direct supervisor would be an extension person. So their annual reviews would be done by an extension person, but it could be done with input from the Lower St. Croix, and that would be written into the agreement, and that would be clearly stated in how we set up that arrangement.
Matt, do you just want to go and ask more questions?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was just more curious, like, how are they being directed to do what they're going to do? Who's doing that? Do we just set them free and they do what extension feels is important? Are we following up with you if we have a concern in our area? Like, it seems a little ambiguous to me as what the heck
it's not going to be ambiguous. It seems ambiguous now because we haven't written the agreement yet. And so we can draft it up however we want to clarify how the chain of command works and who tells them what to do and how they coordinate with their local partners and how they coordinate with their supervisors. So that's where I would encourage you to participate actively in the process of reviewing the agreement if you have input on that, because that's where we were going to clarify how those roles work. And the extension supervisors were very open to this being locally driven and locally led. So I don't have a lot of concern about that, but it would have to be written into our agreement to clarify those roles and responsibilities. Like, I would really like to have the A1 subcommittee be the annual review panel, for example, or at least be actively participating in that annual review process. And then for day-to-day tasks, it's based on the job description. So the extension, and that's one of the things Barbara talked about that is a con of extension, is that sometimes they get spread too thin. And if they get directives from higher up, they're not necessarily able to, meet the goals of the locals. But in this case, with the embedded agent, we're writing the job description. So, and if they're not doing what we want in the job description, then we don't continue the agreement.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to kind of mention that because I've felt occasionally through an AIS capacity that working with extension, I feel like you're not communicating, and they might end up telling, you know, people something different than you necessarily want to tell. So I want to make sure that if we go that route, you know, it's not a bunch of fundings going to something that we feel like we have no control over.
Right.
So the question I had, Jay, we have, you know, a fairly large chunk of money allocated towards this position, but if the person is not starting until fall of this year, does that mean that there is funding available to reallocate towards other, you know, towards like Mary Jo's position or towards other projects, since they're basically missing like the first 6 to 8 months worth of the WBIF grant?
That's a great question. I would push that back to Craig and Emily.
What I would recommend on that one, this is a 3-year grant technically. And so we have a 2-year work plan, but a 3-year grant. The grant agreement does not expire to the end of 2023. So as we are moving forward, if we have an area where we need funds moved around, we can definitely look at doing that. Otherwise, this position can be continued funding into the year 2023 with this grant agreement. Realizing that our new WBIF funds will become available in 2023. Does that answer your questions, Angie?
Yep, I was just trying to type while listening, so I got quiet.
Barbara, did you have anything you also wanted to add, since you had many years of experience working at the U?
Not anything in particular that we haven't already gone through. It's just the more definition and boundary you can give them from the outset, the better it's going to go for us. And so if they're willing to be open and flexible, take advantage of that. That is literally the name of the game. Drive the truck.
Right. So sounds good. I guess keep everybody updated. Are people ready for us to move on to Barbara and I talking about watershed education?
I did have just one piece that I wanted to add in. It's kind of outside of full-time or extension. I think extension is a great direction to go. But my bigger concern is that the position description or it reflects the desire of this group to have an agronomist who has a background in regenerative agriculture and soil health. And I don't see that in the current position description. And I kind of, in my mind, it seems like a parallel track of, you know, back when low impact development was just coming out, we knew that was something we wanted to implement. But if entities kept hiring civil engineers who had stormwater management, but not low impact development management. And I just want to make sure that we're not, that at the end of the day, the position description isn't just a traditional agronomist trained and applies basically only really is trained and understands and has worked with traditional agronomist programs, but instead has some background and experience in regenerative agriculture and soil health, since that's where we're going to be going for over the next decade.
Okay, Mike, I'll make sure to add that language. That's a really good point. And we did have some other edits that were made by the subcommittee, but the terms regenerative ag are not in there. So great. If you have any other comments, things you want to make sure is in the job description, let me know. But what I can do is I can send it out to this group and the A1 subcommittee for edits before I send it off to extension.
Great, thank you.
Okay, cool.
Okay, I'm going to punt to Barbara, maybe to just kind of quickly tell people what you've been up to and getting started on the watershed education.
Yeah. So the last couple of weeks, well, the last month, so I think today is almost officially a month that I've been with you all. So I've been talking a lot with Northern Partners. This week got up and did a couple site visits. So shout out to Jerry, to Paul, and to Craig for hosting me. That's much appreciated. So really just trying to get a lay of the land in terms of where we want to get started and starting to identify either events or programming or content that we really want to start kind of developing to kind of start getting our foot in the door on some of the issues kind of up in the northern areas. Also been helping Angie with some MREP related outreach. So participated in Waterfest last week. Angie will be able to speak to a bit of the watershed events that she's been hosting here and there. We put out the East Metro Lakes e-newsletter last week. I'm still working on compiling information to do a WCD newsletter. Hopefully we'll go out. I will be on vacation next week, my pre-hire vacation, but we'll be back after that. But a lot of chloride related interests has started emerging. And so Angie had already pointed me in the direction of looking at the impacts of chloride as it relates to water softeners, and so how water softeners are contributing to the conversation. So I have an interview scheduled later today with MPCA to kind of talk about that, and starting to put together some articles and outreach materials related to building awareness around that issue. So that's me, Angie.
Yeah. So we had an MREP steering committee meeting on Monday, and MREP is the East Metro Water Resource Education Program. That's the existing watershed education partnership, which has been in Washington County since 2006. And currently that partnership has 25 local government partners. So it includes 14 cities and townships that are participating in the program to meet requirements of their MS4 stormwater permit. And then all 8 of the watershed districts and WMO in the county are partners, as well as the SWCD in the county. So we've been talking all along about, you know, what might this kind of like shared education program look like moving forward if we're also doing education for the Lower St. Croix. And the group was not yet comfortable with the idea of changing a name and having, you know, an inclusive name that's for the whole area, but they were okay with the idea of reaching out to northern cities and the northern counties to ask people if they're interested in becoming official MREP partners. For those that have an MS4 permit, like the city of Wyoming or city of North Branch, they could become paying partners just like the cities in Washington County and kind of get that, you know, that support for meeting their permit requirements. And for the counties and SWCDs, that would allow us to do more individual support as opposed to just doing broad scale general education in the northern watershed. And we also talked about what kind of activities would be MREP versus Lower St. Croix. So there's a lot of overlap. Education is one of those things that doesn't happen in neat boxes. And a lot of the stuff that we do targets multiple audiences and multiple geographical areas. There's also just a scalability and being able to create a program and put it on everywhere, or create a worksheet and, you know, slap different people's logos on it depending on where you are using it. But in general, the stuff that's happening that's going to be what has always happened through MREP will be, you know, the stormwater education, the support for MREP partners, projects and programs like, you know, when Comfort Lake Forest Lake is putting together a watershed update or a watershed management plan update, or when, you know, we're helping Valley Branch Watershed District promote their cost share programs. And then the things that are going to be happening with the new funding through Lower St. Croix will be a lot more support for outreach to agricultural and rural landowners, more support for working with lake associations and shoreline landowners, and just in general, more general education happening up in the northern part of the watershed where obviously MREP hasn't been in the past. So that's kind of what's coming. And for all of the MREP partners, I'm going to be sending them we operate on a 3-year contract. So the MREP partners all sign on and, you know, agree to a set amount that they pay annually for a 3-year period of time. And it's time to renew that. So the MREP partners will all be getting a revised contract to sign for 2022 through 2024. And then we will, for all of you who are in the north, we'll send you one for your consideration that you can decide whether or not you want to join MREP as an official partner. Any questions on that? Everybody got dark screen. So the one other thing I kind of already talked about, the quarterly update, e-update to send to the policy committee. So we don't necessarily need to talk about that, but I do want to make sure to have nice project descriptions and photos, especially to be able to go into that email to really tell the story to the policy committee of what we're doing together. We ever so briefly talked about this at last month's meeting, but having a project tour or some kind of social gathering for the policy committee and other local elected officials in the fall. What are people's thoughts on doing something more like a project tour where they're seeing things versus more like a social gathering, getting to know one another? We have it at a park and it's more like a networking opportunity. Which approach do you think would work better? Because I think if we're planning something for the fall, trying to hit maybe September, Barbara and I should probably get started planning that in the fairly near future to make sure that it gets on everybody's calendars and we get a place reserved. Jerry says project tour. What about other folks?
Angie, I like the project tour idea, but could we coordinate it such that it's like a policy committee meeting and have it, you know, whether we go to South Washington Wash District and see the McQuaid project? Sounds like that's a nice area down by the river. I mean, I'm just trying to think if we looked at, obviously we can't do a big project tour throughout the watershed.
I know that's the challenge of having such a big watershed is I mean, one thing that we could do is consider, like, if we have one a year, you know, kind of rotating, like which region of the watershed we do the tour in. I mean, we do that even with our conservation district annual tour for the board.
That'd be my recommendation, would be look at, you know, rotating it, whether we break the watershed up into a handful of different locations, or just each year someone just says, well, I've got these really cool projects, we could come up into this area and do the tour. I think that'd be the best way about doing it.
Okay.
We're funding the main project, it looks like we're funding this year, would be the South Washington Wash District, and Matt might have some more of these projects. And I know it's not the easiest to go see a gully stabilization project. I know that firsthand, but I think that'd be a good way to go.
So for those of you who are northern partners, do you think your policy committee will be willing to drive down to Denmark Township to see this big project? I see Tiffany nodding yes. Paul, do you think you would have?
Yeah, I think
yes?
I think the person on the policy committee would do that. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That was my only concern, that I didn't know if that would be too far of a drive. Okay. Well, we could
just to clarify that this project is relatively easy to see from a road and a driveway. So
yeah, it's
as far as gully projects, McQuaid is easy to get to.
Yeah, but I think also, Jay, I can think of several cool things that we have done in that vicinity. I'm using we as the big we, that we could show people as examples of other kinds of projects that could happen in their area. Because, you know, there's the Schaefer property, there's the pollinator stuff, there's things at Carpenter Nature Center, St. Croix Bluffs Regional Park. There's, you know, a fair amount of stuff in a pretty tiny area.
And Barrens.
Yeah.
Oh, or like the Trout Brook restoration work.
Trout Brook would be amazing, but then also on the way down or up, we can show off the soon to be delisted Lily Lake. And some of the
would Tony be there though? We want to make sure Tony's there.
Tony's got to be there.
Yeah.
Oh wait, when are we doing this meeting though? I may go away the second half of September, so.
Oh, are you? Okay. Well, I guess we should either do early September or early October then. I don't want to do late October because you never know when it might snow and shoot us.
I would encourage you to stay away from October. We don't have a ton of farmers on the board, but we do have some when you get into October, and they're not going to want farmers.
Early September, we will look at doing project here. I think that gives us enough direction to be able to put something together, and Barbara and I can kind of take it from there. Tour in early September.
I would probably tie that in with my my board tour as well, and probably just get the whole SWCD board out there. And I think that would be cool.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah, I'll rent a separate minivan. That's kind of our tradition anyway.
Yeah, do you think people are all going to want to ride on a bus together, like that kind of project tour, or are people going to want a caravan? Got any thoughts? We don't need to discuss the hairy details right now, but I know we've done for Washington Water Consortium, we've done, you know, rent a bus and take everybody on a tour kind of things before. And there's always a couple of people who follow along in cars, but that might be a nice option if we don't want to have a whole bunch of people parking on a rural road.
I think in
the post-COVID period, since we're not sure about things, I would probably lean against the bus at this point.
Okay.
Just
Yeah, that was my main thing, is that I wasn't sure how people are feeling about squishing together up on a bus right now.
I know the Sunrise Board has scheduled a tour for the fall and they are doing a bus, so just FYI.
All right.
We are too. Browns Creek is probably later this fall. So
okay, we're all going to get on buses and we're all going to go lots of places.
I think if you know, don't have to make it so it depends on how many people are on it and if you need to be all squished up against each other or whatnot, but it's hard to keep a giant caravan of people all together and arrive at a site without waiting for an extra 20 minutes for each person there.
Okay. All right, I think that is all for education then. So Becky, do you want to talk about conversations from the Wetlands Subcommittee?
For sure. So we met Monday and had a good conversation. And I don't know, did you want me to share what we've been working on or just kind of describe it real quick? As far as our citing criteria.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know enough to know how to answer your question, so maybe more detail is better.
Okay, sounds good. Well, can you allow me to screen share?
I can, yeah, give me one moment here. And, all right, yep, you should be able to share now.
Thank you. Let's see here if we can find it. Oh, I'm sorry, taking up so much time. I did not mean to do that.
Sorry, I didn't give you much heads up that I was almost done talking.
Nope, that's okay. So I'll just start talking about it first. We've been pretty good about, wow, now I can't find it. I'm gonna just have to describe it. Sorry about that, guys. I had it all set up too earlier and I don't know what happened to it. We've been working on our criteria for wetland restorations, kind of the same, probably a lot like, you know, what others look like as well. Has to be in the priority watershed. And Mike, I didn't see, I apologize. I don't think I responded to your email. So I'll send you what we have for a draft to see if that your project fits that, Mike. So we'll do that when I get back in the office. I'm actually not in the office right now. So we kind of have some like just basic project requirements, including it has to be in the priority watershed, vetted in a study, can't be a wetland banking project, things like that. And those are just kind of yes or no's. If you check off a no, then it automatically is disqualified. And then our scoring criteria includes phosphorus reduction, secondary benefits, how soon the project can be put in the ground, finances like match potential, location, likelihood of success. So those are all things that we work through. The thing that we're kind of a little bit hung up on is how to determine phosphorus removal, what kind of model. And because everybody has different capabilities depending on their office, depending on what they have for just base information. For instance, Pine County has limited soil information, so it makes it harder for them to use some of the models. So we're just trying to come up with probably a couple different models. Some folks already have all their projects kind of in place because they've already had them in a study, so they already have the numbers. Other folks don't. So we're just trying to, that's kind of where we're stuck right now. So we're meeting next Wednesday in hopes to, I'm sorry, is it Wednesday the 7th? So no, 2 weeks. We're gonna meet one more time, hopefully get that kind of finalized and hammered out, and then we'll be able to have the application. And then so the next meeting I'll be able to present all that, and we should be able to start taking applications. I think we're hoping this fall, and that's kind of it.
Quick question. One of the criteria you said was embedded in a study. What do you mean by that?
So we really wanted one of these projects to be somehow addressed, not necessarily like that particular site, but you know, if it's in a watershed study, if it's in a county, you know, water plan, anything that talks about maybe that watershed, we're just trying to have it somehow vetted in some type of study at some point. And of course, like I said, a lot of these are not going to be specifically called out in any particular study because, you know, as we get good projects and they come in, but that was one of our criteria at this point.
So Becky, just to clarify, and when you say criteria, it basically is it would be scored, correct? It's not like a gatekeeper criteria. Like if it's not in a study, it won't be considered. I just want to clarify that.
Sure, actually, you're right. It is a gatekeeper at this point. If people feel like that might be something that will, you know, really cause issues, I can talk to the committee about it, the subcommittee about it. It was kind of a concern of mine, honestly. But because I don't do a lot of cost share and not as familiar with that process, I wasn't sure how much of a gatekeeper it would be. You know, would that throw out too many good projects? I don't know. So if that's a concern that folks have, I can bring that back to the subcommittee.
Yeah, this is Mike again. I think that the challenge I see with that is that we still have large gaps for studies, even in like our sub-watershed analysis work. And so I think you're going to run up against, you know, somebody finds a willing landowner to do a project, but there isn't a sub-watershed analysis or any study done. And I don't know if it's a tough one because so maybe I would lean more towards it being a scoring question versus a gatekeeper question, just because we do have gaps. We do have a lot of gaps in the watershed where we don't have studies completed. And
for sure. No, that's a very good valid point. So I will definitely bring that up to the subcommittee and talk to them some more about that and maybe make it, like you said, you know, worth some points, obviously, but because, you know, there is some, I think, and again, I think it doesn't necessarily have to be like an individual project. We know that a lot of those aren't going to be found anywhere in any type of study. It's more just, I think, a generalization, but I'll talk to them some more about that. And maybe we will just change it to a scoring criteria versus a gatekeeper. So thank you for the feedback.
I have a question that's kind of for the whole steering committee. When we were up in Pine County yesterday, Caleb and others were talking about some potential projects that would be wetland restorations on ag land. And we only have this tiny amount of funding allocated for wetlands and a rather large amount of funding allocated for ag projects. And so the question is, where would those kinds of projects land?
And
could they be moved into the ag category to provide for more of them to be able to happen?
And thank you for bringing that up, Angie. And maybe that's kind of where some of the members of the subcommittee are landing, is that we have such a small amount that, you know, because of that, that's why that was one of the gatekeeper questions. I can see that response, but you're right. We only have $40,000. It's just really not a lot of money. And so, and I'm not sure, I'm sure Ag BMP too, there's probably, you know, so many projects that could be used up quite quickly as well. So I don't want to shove them that way, but it seems like that might be a possibility. Like if we truly have a wetland restoration, then that's the place to go, and that's fine. But if there's other places that it can fit, it might be better off in the long run there. It probably will be more competitive, put it that way.
Seems like like they could go either place, but if they shift into that Ag BMP category, then they're going to have to meet some of those scoring criteria that include being identified in a study, right? I mean, I guess that's just a scoring criteria in there. It's not a gatekeeper. Like that it be identified in a study, right?
Right now for the wetland restorations, it is a gatekeeper at this point that it's identified in a study.
Right, and it is for the Ag BMP section too. So.
It is, okay.
Yeah.
Well, and I guess for the Ag BMPs, we have target receiving water bodies that it would need to, if it was a wetland restoration, it would need to benefit one of those target receiving water bodies. So for example, Mike Eisensee's, that was a wetland one, couldn't fit in the ag category because it's not going to a priority receiving water body. All right, it was just a question that I was wondering, because it seemed like there was a potential for a lot of these ag wetland restoration kind of projects to happen.
Well, could they apply to both and then see which one works out better? I don't know if that's a possibility.
Becky, a question for the group. How are you dealing with the phosphorus numbers? I mean, how are we coming up best to get the pollution reduction numbers?
We're really
not a great model.
Right, we're really struggling with that. Like I said, because there are some folks that already have really good numbers that they use SWOT models and things, so they have some pretty solid numbers. Whereas there's just not a lot of, and if anybody has any advice, we've really kind of come up against a wall, because some of the folks don't have the ability to, utilize GIS, or if they do, it's, just within in office. I don't think we're expecting folks to go and, hire a firm to, come up with a model. And it sounds like some of the SWOT models could take quite a while to, weeks of time potentially. And so, but we want to make it somewhat equitable that, we're not just, we want to have some real numbers, because we obviously have a goal target that we need to meet. So we need to make sure that we're doing that. So we're just talking, to others that may have models that they've used in the past that they feel comfortable with. There is a new one that came out that I'm going to, and I'm not sure exactly how this is going to work, but I'm going to run it and see if the numbers seem reasonable. But we all know that, I think that's, wetland restorations are a little bit different in the sense that, it's, I think, gullies, like we were talking about earlier today, those numbers are a little bit easier maybe to come up with. But wetland restorations, you're talking more dissolved phosphorus, so it's just a different animal. And so if anybody has models out there that they've used in the past that they're comfortable with, that they feel like are, somewhat, doable, not become so complicated that we have to hire somebody to run the numbers, that would be great. We'd appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm very curious about that as well. And whatever input that we have in this will definitely funnel into the prioritization subcommittee work as well.
Yeah, this is Mike again. What we have decided to do is we're just doing monitoring of the wetland because we couldn't find a better methodology for evaluating its contributing load. So that's been our approach. And so maybe it's where I would recommend that in the that there's an option to do targeted monitoring instead of modeling, because their entities, I think, are moving towards monitoring wetland outlets. And then the ones that they find that have significant contributing loads, then they're prioritizing those for restoration. I'm sorry, Emily, go ahead.
That's okay. Something similar for Comfort Lake Forest, like doing some actual monitoring. And then I'm not going to pretend to know how modeling really works, but I seem to recall that our engineer EOR uses something called PondNet. I don't know if they like made that or if anybody else knows what that is, but I mean, maybe one thing what the group might want to do is use some of that 40,000 in technical and engineering and have an engineer come in and do that kind of modeling work, so we have some good numbers to work with.
Okay, I can bring that back and let them. I think what I'll do is I'll send out an email today with some of these questions so that we have that, we're prepared for our next meeting to kind of hammer it out, because we really want to try to get moving again and have this finished up. Yeah, I think, Mike, I mean, I know what you're talking about. We've done some monitoring too. My only concern there is I don't know if the timeframes work, because I mean, you get the data before, correct? But then you do the project and then you get the data after. And what if you find out that, after monitoring, you didn't really do anything, spent that money on that project? I'm not sure. How does that work? Can you describe that a little bit more?
So can I just jump in quick? the A8 subcommittee is going to be working on prioritization protocols. And so I think everything that we're talking about now is actually going to be, we're going to try to address that as part of our protocol update. And we're going to talk about monitoring. We're going to talk about, hopefully have guidance on how to actually monitor wetlands, because you start getting into monitoring wetlands, you bring up so many issues about seasonality, and you have long-term trends of loading, you have wet period loading and dry period loading, and it's very complicated. And I agree with you, Becky, it's tough to monitor pre-post in wetlands. And it's also, one grab sample does not tell you what an annual loading is or an average over 10 years is, and like what's our threshold for being able to estimate what an actual loading is from wetland that might not have a lot of loading in one decade, but then have a lot of loading the next. And so there's a lot of information that we need to compile and make recommendations to this group on how we're actually going to use the modeling and the monitoring to make better decisions. But that we are going to have a proposal that's going to be developed to actually update our prioritization protocols. And that's going to happen this fall and winter. That work will likely happen this fall and winter. So with that, I've done my A8 update.
There you go. Okay, took care of two things. Well, I really appreciate that. But so you're saying this fall, but the earliest would be this fall, though, that we'd have that.
We're not going to have updated protocols. That's going to help guide all of our prioritization work. Done by this fall, there's going to be more work that's going to be necessary, especially if we're incorporating a lot of these concepts of targeted monitoring.
Okay, so if we were to use monitoring as a criteria or as a potential alternative to modeling, we wouldn't be able to accept applications till that was already put in place, correct?
No, I think there are ways around that. I think like what Comfort Lake has been doing, what Mike's talking about, is that you are taking some samples to identify if there's a super high loading coming out of a certain wetland. You're also doing some other kind of landscape evaluation as part of that. And then when you design your BMP, you're estimating your load reductions based on that sampling amount, and then you're having a % reduction. So there are ways to get around having to do pre and post monitoring, Becky. You have to incorporate some sort of modeling in addition to the estimations, the pre-project loading estimations.
Okay, all right.
You're making assumptions left and right with this stuff, though. We just have to.
I know.
That.
Yeah, and that's just how it is. And I think it's partly right, because in the past, when we would do restorations, for instance, in the WACA world, we didn't care about water quality. I mean, we just knew that there's intrinsic, yes, probably water quality benefits, but we never measured them. It was all about vegetation and then just making sure that they met their hydrology criteria. And so for me, I mean, this is great. I'm learning a lot about, all these things, but it's just so different mentality, because we're just looking at very different things. And I just don't know if that's just been done in the past that much as far as, determining phosphorus reductions. And so I think we're that's a new emerging field. And so we're just kind of struggling a little bit, but we'll figure it out. So we appreciate all the feedback.
Yeah, I think what Emily was referring to in PondNet is probably good guidance in that, with cities having to clean out their stormwater ponds, they have to do pre-post cleaning load reduction estimations. And so a lot of those modeling efforts and estimations that we're getting from stormwater pond cleanouts might be something we could extrapolate to some of these wetland restorations that are happening.
That's awesome. All right, thanks, guys.
All right. I know we are at 9:30. Do people have time to stay on for a few more minutes, and we can try to real quick hit the rest of the subcommittee updates? Susanna, do you have an update from internal analysis group?
Yes, we do have an update. Quickly, our subcommittee, we met on Tuesday and reviewed a draft application form. We have a list of items that applicants will submit with their application, and then a list of deliverables that consultants will submit with their quotes. We started to revise our selection criteria to develop that ranking scale, if it was going to be more gatekeeper, yes, no questions, or having a scale format similar to the wetlands ranking. We're going to continue to revise our form and plan to meet. Doodle poll has gone out, so we hope to meet the week of July 19th and then have more of a final form to bring to this committee at the end of July. And I can kind of run through some of the application requirements and the deliverables if there's time, or if can even send out a draft to the group, but we do plan to have more of a final draft for review at the end of the month.
What do people think? Would you like to, if Susanna sends something to me, would you like to see it now if I send it to the rest of the group now, or do you want to wait to see a finished thing? Anyone? Is anyone still left here?
I guess I would like to wait for the subcommittee to get things finalized and have a formal recommendation from the subcommittee.
So it's something that this group can talk about at the August meeting then? Or we're still in June. It's something the group can talk about in the July meeting.
Yeah, for July.
The months they all just are the same.
They'll blend together in the summer.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
So you'll have a finalized application form and selection criteria for the group to review at the July meeting.
Yeah, hopefully finalized. We'll be on track with our timeline to send the request for quotes by late summer, if we have a more finalized version in July.
Okay, and then Jay, did you want anything else to say about targeting analysis, or was that all? Did you say it all?
I think Mike alluded to the non-structural urban work that's underway that we're going to be coming back later in the year with some project proposals, and we're going to be doing kind of the street sweeping evaluation work that's coming up. The big task item right now is the super smart people in our subcommittee, plus a couple support staff folks, are going to be putting together a proposal to update our prioritization protocol. And that's actually going to take a substantial amount of time. And so we're anticipating that coming back as an actual, like a work plan for updating the protocols and updating the SWA protocols, and also integrating other techniques like targeted monitoring, for example, into our prioritization checklist. And so that's something that is going to be coming forward. We were running into some delays because of vacation schedules and everything like that. So we're going to be hopefully getting together as the subcommittee that's going to be pulling together the proposal for updating the prioritization protocol next week sometime.
Okay.
Other than that, anybody else who was in those meetings have any additional comments? The other piece is, if we have, I think relatively soon, we're going to be sending out a request for folks who, if they have an actual prioritization work that they want to start and initiate, you don't necessarily have to wait to have the new protocols in place to get people to start implementing some generally approved approaches for prioritization. And so that's something that will likely come out.
Right. So Emily, tell us, how far are we on our cumulative progress towards water quality goals? With McQuaid, are we 44% of the way there? Or was it 40?
I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, and are we reaching our TMDL goals too for the St. Croix? How many metric tons more do we have to go?
Here, let's see, just for the St. Croix, the TMDL is 37,000. So what do we have? 220
out of 37,000.
Uh-huh.
Well.
Do an infographic for that one. It's going to be depressing, but informative.
when somebody said earlier that the McQuaid project would get us 44% of our pollution reduction goal, is that for the whole WBIF grant or the reduction goal just for the ag category of the WBIF grant?
That was based off the ag, urban activities 2 and 5 categories.
Okay.
That makes more sense. Yeah, the 2-year proposed reduction for structural ag is 300 pounds per year.
And I believe urban's 200, isn't it, Emily?
And then urban is 200. Yep.
Yeah, so
So
that's where
ag-
the 44% comes in there.
Mhm.
Okay. All right then.
So yeah, just that time scale, like what we're trying to accomplish in 2 years, that looks like a better percentage.
Then the team deal. All right. Any other topics that we need to add for the next meeting, or are we all ready to go off to our busy days?
I have 2 questions. Angie, how many followers do you have right now on TikTok?
Let's see. As of this morning, I don't know, 38,000.
How many views? What's been your highest views so far in one
It's the
showing?
poison ivy video. It's still the poison ivy video. It's at 4.5 million now. Everybody wants to know what poison ivy looks like. Yep.
So pretty soon we're gonna have to like these videos when Angie hosts them. We're gonna have to like these, so just anyway.
Mhm.
And Mike Eisensee, how was the bike ride?
That was great. Yep. So I covered 220 miles in 5 days, camping in a hammock along the Mississippi. I ended up by going south instead of north.
Awesome.
Yep. Yep. It was a hoot. I'm definitely going to do it again, maybe even this year.
That's all I have, thanks.
Yeah. Craig, actually, you'd be entertained. I made a TikTok just this week about porous pavement. 110,000 views in like 1 day about porous pavement. Who would think people would be so excited about that? Such a random niche interest.
They want to watch you, Angie.
They want to
That's
watch
what it
me
is,
pour
Angie.
water into the
That's the it
pavement.
factor.
Okay, everyone. Happy Thursday. See you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right.
Everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.